So we are reviewing for your Chapter 5 test tomorrow. Remember that the generic form for the equation of an exponential function is a times b to the x power. Remember that this a value is your initial value. That's what it's starting off at. So any of these word problems, that's the value that it starts off with. Then you're multiplying by your factor, whether it's a growth factor or decay factor, but your b value is your factor, and then it's to the x power. Remember that most of the time you will have to find the rate. If it's growth, your factor equals 1 plus your rate. If it's decay, your factor equals 1 minus your rate. The rate is normally as a decimal, but it could be as a percent also. Sometimes you have to convert back and forth depending on what the question is asking you for. So if we take a look at this first one, it says the zombie apocalypse has started. 20, notice how they hide that number. 20 lab workers were originally infected, and the number of zombies grew exponentially at a rate of 150% per day. So go ahead and just do number 1, please. Write a function to represent the situation and simplify it to z of t equals a times b to the t form. Just do number 1, please, because if you get number 1 wrong, 2 and 3 are automatically going to be wrong. So just do number 1, please. So when we take a look at a problem like this, we have z of t, all right? That's the letters that they want you to use. So we have to use z of t equals, and then we're going to have a number and then parentheses to the t power. So our a value, remember it's a times b, being b being in the parentheses. Our a value is our initial value. That's what we're starting off at. So that is 20. So I'm going to put a 20 in front of my parentheses as my a value. Our b value, notice that they give you the percent. They give you 150%. Well, as a decimal, all right, as a decimal, we have to move the decimal point over 2 places. So that is really a rate of 1.5. Well, remember, this is growth, all right, because it's getting bigger and bigger every day. Our formula is 1 plus the rate. Our rate is 1.5. So we really have 1 plus 1.5. So that means our b value here is 2.5. Take a look at question number 2. How many zombies will there be after 5 days? Go ahead and do number 2, please. So all that we have to do is take this 5 and sub it in for t into our equation. So we have 20 times 2.5 to the 5th power. Hit enter. Now, you're not going to type in, you can't have 0.125 of a zombie. All right, so we're just going to round to be 1,953 zombies because we can't have 0.125 of a zombie. The world population is around 7 billion. You see what that looks like? How many days will it take to infect everyone? Go ahead and try number 3, please. If you forgot how to do this, you have to type this into your y equals. We have to type in 20 times 2.5 to the x power. And then we go to our table, second and table. Now we have to find 7 billion in our table. So we have to keep on scrolling down until we reach 7 billion. Now you're going to notice that once we get to day 12, it puts it in scientific notation. That's why I tabbed over to my Y1 column so I can read the numbers at the bottom, because those are the actual numbers. They give you a lot more decimal places, and we need to tab down until we get to 7 billion people. Sort of hard to keep track of a little bit, but it is in between. It is in between. Notice that 21, we have, I believe this is 4 billion, right? And then here we get to 11 billion. So 7 billion is in between 4 billion and 11 billion. So this is between 21 and 22 days. Remember, you're not going to get an exact number there. It's going to be between 2 different days. Take a look at the next question. We're going to do more of that type of question as we go. A vaccine for zombieism was developed, and the number of zombies decreased. So now we're talking about decay, right? Notice the days and the number of zombies getting smaller and smaller. Go ahead and try 4, 5, 6, and 7, please. Go ahead and try 4, 5, 6, and 7, please. In order to do this question, first of all, this is decay because the numbers are going down. So that is decay. Write a function in this form. So we have z of t equals, and now it's a times b to the t power. Well, our a value is our original number. So 30,000. And then inside the parentheses is your factor. Well, in order to find the factor from a table, we need to divide going up. We need to divide going up the table. Choose any 2 consecutive numbers. So if you just chose the 2 smallest numbers, you would do 243 divided by 810. When you do that, you get 0.3. That 0.3 is your factor. That is the number that goes inside those parentheses like that. That is your b value. So what is the factor? Again, your factor is your b value. That is 0.3. What is the rate? Well, because we're dealing with decay, our formula says b equals 1 minus the rate. Or sorry, 1 minus the rate. The factor is 0.3, so we have to sub that in and solve this equation. We want to solve for r, so we want to do -1 and -1 first. So we get negative 0.7 equals negative r. There is really a 1 in front of that r, so we have to divide by -1, divide by -1. Negative 0.7 divided by -1 is positive 0.7. You can either write it as, remember, rates are either written as a decimal or a percent. So if you wanted to, you could also write 70%. Take a look at the next one. For questions 8 through 14, you want to use this function, 4 times 1/4 to the x power. You're going to fill in the chart. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is type this into the y equals, and then graph it. After you find the points, find your asymptote, domain, range, x-intercept, y-intercept, and then say whether it's increasing or decreasing over the domain or over the range. Go ahead and do 8 through 14, please. Go ahead and do all 6 of those questions. This is gonna take you a couple minutes. Gonna give you about 1 more minute here. Again, the first thing that you should have done was type in that equation, 4 times 1/4 to the x power. You should have typed that into your y equals. After you type that into your y equals, you want to use the table function. So second and then table. I need to go up because it's still from the zombie question. So our table over here starts off with -2. -2 is 64. -1 is 16. 0 is 4. 1 is 1. 2 is 0.25. And 3 is 0.0625. Again, I just got those numbers right from the table. So going to graph these, we're going over to -2 up to +64. You will have to graph it on tomorrow's quiz. Over to -1 up to +16. Over 0 up to 4. Over to 1 up to 1. Over to 2 up to 0.25, which you won't even be able to see, and 3 is 0.0625. So when we go to graph these, you can see that we have a curve that looks like this. So when we look at the asymptote is the thing that it is approaching. It is approaching it, but never crossing it. So it is approaching this axis. It is approaching the x-axis, which we can also call y equals 0, because y equals 0 is the x-axis. Hint, hint, important for tomorrow's test. Hint, hint. The domain. Domain are your x values. Well, it's going on and on and on forever in both directions, both negative numbers and positive numbers in both directions. So this is all of your real x values. The range is your y values. This keeps on going up and up and up and up, but we're not getting into the negatives at all. So this is all of the terms that are greater than 0. So your y values are all bigger than 0 because it's not negative numbers. Your x-intercept, where does it cross the x-axis? It doesn't. So there is none. The y-intercept, where does it cross the y-axis? It crosses the y-axis right here, which is this point, 0, comma. It always starts off with 0, comma. So this is 0, comma 4. The function is, well, as we go from left to right, just like we're reading a sentence, this is going down. So it is decreasing. So I know it's not D or E or A because I know that it's decreasing. And now is it decreasing over the entire range or over the entire domain? It is always over the domain because it is going down as we keep on going out on our x values, which is our domain. So it should have been choice C. You will have a question just like this on your test tomorrow. Take a look at the next one. Mark deposits $5,000 into a compound interest account with a interest rate of 0.95%. Write the function, determine the balance after 15 years, and then estimate how much it will take him to reach $6,000. This is just like that first question that we had. Go ahead and do number 15, please. So our A value is our initial value. That's the 5,000. So in our function, I'm going to write f of x equals, and our A value is our initial value, which is $5,000. That's how much you put into the account. Now for our factor, which is our B value, we have to figure out, all right, we have to figure it out. They give you a rate of 0.95%. We want to make that into a decimal. The way that you make a percent into a decimal is to move the decimal point over 2 places. So our rate, B equals 1 plus R. Our rate is really 0.0095. So in order to figure out your factor, we have to do 1 plus 0.0095. So we really have a B value of 1.0095. That's our B value, 1.0095. And that is to the x power. So again, I found that this was our rate. They tell you specifically it's a rate. It's a percent. We need to make it into a decimal. So I moved the decimal point over 2 places and subbed it into my formula. So then we have 1 plus that. I know that it's plus because you're depositing it into a savings account and it's going to grow. It's going to get bigger. So how much in the account after 15 years? You have to take your 15 and sub it into our x. So 5,000 times 1.0095. Close your parentheses to the 15th power. When we do that, we get that as a number. We're talking about money, so we're going to round to the nearest penny. So I would put down $5,761.89 because we're talking about money. Estimate how many years it will take him to reach 6,000. So again, I need to go to my y equals. I need to type in our original equation of 5,000 times 1.0095 to the x power. I'm going to type that into my y equals, and I need to go to my table and find where 6,000 is. So I'm going to go down, 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 down until I get to 6,000. We're at 5,800, 5,900. Ooh, there's 6,000. So somewhere in between the 19th and 20 years, somewhere in between the 19th and 20th year, it will reach 6,000. Take a look at the next one. In number 16, the expenses for a company this year were $10,000. The expenses have been increasing at a rate of 10.25% each year. Write a function that represents the company's expenses as a function of time in years. Notice that they are helping you out here by writing this, all right? Go ahead and do A and B. B asks you how much will the expenses be after 7 years. Go ahead and try this one, please. Just like the previous question. So they had E of t, so that's what they wanted you to use on this one. So E of t equals our original number. Our original number was 10,000 times, in parentheses, now our rate, they have 10.25%. We need to move the decimal point over 2 places. So this becomes the decimal 0.1025, all right, when we move the decimal point over 2 places. So that's the decimal that goes right here, 0.1025, when we move the decimal point over 2 places. So 1 plus that gives me 1.1025 to the t power. How much will the expenses be after 7 years? We have to take that 7 and sub it in for t. So when you go and do that, you just go to your calculator, 10,000 times 1.1025 to the 7th power. When we do that, again, we're talking about money, so we're going to round to the nearest penny. You get $19,799.32 when you round it. So again, you have to take your decimal and you have to move the decimal point over 2 places. That's your rate. And then you have to add it to the 1 because this is growth. I knew it was growth because it said increasing. Take a look at the next one. Write the exponential function for the graph shown below. This is what we did yesterday. You have to go to Stat and Edit and type in your points. You have to go to Stat and Edit and type in your points. We don't know, all All right, we don't know. This one is above the axis, so we don't know that point. We can't type it in. This one, we don't know exactly what it is, so we can't type that one in either. So we know what these three are because those are exact points. So only use those 3 points. Go ahead and type those into your stat edit. This is the point you go over and then up. So the first point is over to 0 up to 1. This point is over to 1 up to 3. And this point is over to 2 up to 9. So those are the 3 points that you're typing in. So L1 is your X's. And L2 are your Y's. So your table, your L1 and your L2 should look like this: 0, 1, 2, and 1, 3, 9. To do our exponential regression, remember that you have to go to Stat, Calc, and then you have to go down to 0, which is the exponential regression. Hit Enter. We want to use our L1 and our L2, so we're going to go down to Calculate. Hit Enter. Notice that it tells you what your A and B are. So we have Y equals 1 times 3 to the X power. That would be our exponential function. If this was a multiple choice question on the Regents exam, you might not see that 1 there. They might just write Y equals 3 to the X, because multiplying something by 1 doesn't change its value at all. Take a look at the next question. Use your calculator and the following table to find the exponential regression equation. Notice that it says to round to the nearest hundredth. Go ahead and try this one, please. So again, we're going to Stat Edit, and we are typing in these values from the table. So it looks like we have a cockroach problem in this one. The number of cockroaches are increasing every day. That would be growth. Just on a side note, that would be growth. So I type them into my L1 and my L2. The biggest mistake that people make is doing typos. Notice that it even says double check your list for typos. So we go to Stat, Calc. We go down to 0, which is our exponential regression. Then we hit Enter, go down to Calculate, hit Enter, and notice that we have big, long decimal answers. That's why our question said round to the nearest hundredth. So our A value would round to 63.49. And our B value would round to 1.92 to the X power. So that's how we do number 18. Take a look at the number 19. In number 19, 15,625 children paid admission to a theme park. Each year, the number of paid admissions decreases. So again, notice that this is decay because it's decreasing by 2%. What will the number of admissions be in 10 years? So the first thing that you need to do is figure out your equation, and you need to figure out your growth, your rate, and your factor. Go ahead and try this one, please. Remember that because we're dealing with decay in this question, you have to use b equals 1 minus r because we're using decay in this one. Two percent. We don't want the percent, we want the decimal. So you have to move the decimal point over 2 places. So this becomes the decimal 0.02. Well, our A value is our initial value, which is 15,625. Our B value, our rate is 0.02. So 1 minus 0.02 is 0.98. That is what our B value is. I had to take my 0.2, sub it into my formula. They gave us the rate, so 1 minus 0.02 is 0.98. So that times 0.98, we want it in 10 years, so that is to the 10th power. You're going to take that and type it right directly into the calculator. It said round to the nearest child, so this would be 12,767 as our answer. We have a couple more of these type of problems. Take a look at this one. Roseanne deposited $500 in her savings account. It earns 1.5% interest. How much will her balance be in 20 years? Go ahead and try number 20, please. Again, since you're putting it into the account, it's growing. So this is going to be growth. Our A value is our initial number. So 500 goes there. Times, now we need to figure out our growth factor. We need to figure out our factor. Notice that they gave you the percent again. You need to take and move the decimal point over 2 places. So our R is really 0.015 because we had to make our percent into a decimal. So we have 1 plus 0.015. So that becomes 1.015. That's what our B is. So times 1.015, we want to know after 20 years, so to the 20th power. You would just take this and type it right into the calculator. When you do that, because we're dealing with money, we're going to round to the nearest penny. And you should have gotten $673.43. Again, you always want to take your percent and move the decimal point 2 places to the right. If it's growth, we want to use the 1 plus R formula. If it's decay, we want to use 1 minus R. Go ahead and try number 21. A small library started off the year with 250 books. Each day, a fourth of the books are taken out. Now, taken out means that it's going down. So what we're talking about in this problem is decay. When it says a fourth of the books, a fourth is really 25%. So they're taking out 25% of the books each day. How many books will be left after 5 days? Round to the nearest book. Go ahead and try this one, please. So again, we're talking about decay, so we want to use the decay formula for our factor. So we have, first of all, the A value. It's starting off with 250 books, so 250 goes here, times our B value. Our B value we need to figure out. They're given the percent of 25%. We need to move the decimal point over 2 places. So that means our R is really 0.25. So 1 minus 0.25. 1 minus 0.25 is 0.75. That is our B value. So times 0.75 to the x power, but it's not to the x power. It is to the 5th power because it says 5 days. So you're going to type this right into the calculator. 250 times 0.75 to the 5th power. You're rounding to the nearest book. So our answer would be 59. One more, last one. Try this one. The profit for the Brown Derby restaurant was $75,000 this year. Each year the profit increased. So we know right away that word increased means that we're talking about growth at a rate of 0.9% per year. How much will the profit be after the 10th year? Go ahead and try this one, please. So they're starting off with $75,000. So that is our A value. Our B value, they say that it's growing at a rate of 0.9%. We need to move the decimal point over 2 places. So this ends up being an R value of 0.009. So we need to sub that in, 1 plus 0.009. So we get B equals 1.009. So 1.009 in for our B. After the 10th year, so it's to the 10th power. When you do that, you get $82,030.04. That is what your test looks like tomorrow.